Welcome back to Old Guy REI. Today I wanted to talk about how we are analyzing our deals, and hopefully it will be helpful to someone out there. We had a property presented to us through a turnkey provider that we've worked with in the past, and I'm going to use that as our example today. This was a property in St. Louis, Missouri, and it's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home, 1,000 square feet. The turnkey provider has a qualified tenant ready to place, and the rent's going to be $1,000 a month. So we're going to start with those numbers. When we look at turnkey deals, typically the provider will also send out a pro forma or an assumption of how the numbers should look if you purchase this property. In their pro forma, they have a down payment of 25% and an interest rate of 6.5%. And then from there, they also have deductions for taxes and insurance. So we'll start with that. So on this property, the taxes are about $89 and the insurance works out to about $59 in their pro forma. When we put all that together, it comes out to about $529 for the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So we're going to deduct that from the $1,000 of rent. Once you do that, then you typically would subtract the property management fee. In this case, it's $80. So from $471, you subtract the $80, and that takes you down to $391. From there, you would then subtract the 5% each for vacancy and maintenance, and that totals $100. So you go from $391, subtracting the $100 brings you to $291. And when we figure out our cash-on-cash return, we'll take that $291, multiply it by 12 for each month, and then you'll divide it by the total amount of money that you're in on the deal. And in this case, the assumption is $22,500. So the cash-on-cash return comes out to 15%, which sounds pretty good. A couple of the things that I think should be looked at a little bit differently. One is they don't have any number in there for CapEx, which are the larger ticket items like a roof, a water heater, or a furnace. And they typically leave them out because these properties are rehabbed. So either those things are less than 5 years old or they've been replaced during the rehab. And that's why they're assuming you shouldn't have a big expense like that. And then the other number that I usually find that's different is the insurance, because they're putting in a number that would be an actual cash value insurance premium, and I usually run mine with a full replacement value. So I find that the insurance number is usually twice what they say. So when we run the analysis the way I do it for ourselves, then we'll notice that difference. So if we plug in the numbers, those two things, it adds another $100 that you should deduct. So we were at $291 in their first calculation. If we take out the $100, which is the difference of insurance and a little bit of money for CapEx, then that drops you down to $191 of positive cash flow. And then that drops the cash-on-cash return down to 10%. Now, I'm going to go through it the way I would typically analyze the deal for us. When I run the numbers for us, I'm assuming that we would put 20% down, and for this deal I used 7% interest. So I also added $50 to the insurance number. So when we run the numbers now, the pity on this, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, comes out to $618. And we're going to deduct that from the $1,000 of rent, which brings us down to $382. From there, we're going to take the $80 out for property management, which leaves $302. And then from there, I'm taking out 15%, which is 5% for CapEx, 5% for maintenance, and 5% for vacancy. That totals $150. So from the 302, we subtract the 150, and that leaves us 152 of positive cash flow. Now in this deal, we were only all in 18,500, but I just rounded up to 20. So if we do now we have $150 of positive cash flow times 12 divided by 20,000 gives you a cash on cash return of a little over 9%, which is not bad. The other thing that I want to chat about too is when I was talking to this turnkey provider, I tried to reach him before he had placed a tenant because I think $1,000 a month is a little bit low for the area. We have another 2-bedroom not too far from this one, and we're getting $1,150 for that one. So unfortunately, he had placed a tenant, but what he had said, and this is going to change things a lot, he said he was willing to give us a credit of $2,200 to make up for the low rent. So this is where things get really interesting. If he's going to give us $2,200 credit, that means I could spread that over 2 years. And if I do that, it's $91 per month. If I add the $91 to the $1,000 rent that we're getting now, then it's $1,091. And if we rerun the cash on cash analysis, then that would bring us to a 14% cash on cash return, which is a little bit better. That would give us $243 per month of positive cash flow. The other thing that we've talked about recently is that 15% that we set aside for reserves each month. Since we already have reserves for this property, should we add it into our positive cash flow? If you do that, then your cash on cash return jumps up to like 23%. If we end up needing some reserves for repairs or anything, instead of letting that 15% go into a regular savings account, then we would start replenishing the reserves account. When we added that $150 from the expenses back into our cash flow, that brought it up to $393 per month of cash flow. And I wouldn't call that positive cash flow because you might need to start putting that 15% back in to replenish your reserves if you had to use any of that for anything. But I think that's a pretty good return for a less than a $20,000 investment. I'm not sure, but I think you probably only get $50 a month if you had that in a high yield savings account. And that's the way I look at it. You know, $20,000 in a bank account for $50 a month, or $400 a month, plus all the other benefits that you're going to get from the property. You know, appreciation, depreciation, principal pay down because the tenant's paying the mortgage, things like that. So I'd like to get some feedback if you guys have any thoughts. We have weekly Zoom meetings, and some of the folks in there, most of them agreed with the way I was analyzing the deal and the way I thought we should be able to take that 15% expense money and just put it away in a savings account. I think we're lucky because we don't need the cash flow to live on right now. So we'll just be letting that add up. And then if another property like this pops up, we'll have the funds to purchase it. Another thought I had while I was making this video is that when I spoke earlier about the turnkey provider giving us the $2,200 credit, and that would bring the rent to $1,091 per month. After the first year, since the tenant's paying $1,000, if we added $50 to the rent for the second year, then that would increase our cash flow, and that would end up being about $443 per month. So that's another positive as well. Earlier, I talked about some of the other things that we think about when we're analyzing a property, things like crime rates, and there's a few sites that we look at to check out those statistics. One is called Spot Crime. There's also a company called Door Profit that has a website and they have a really good crime map. Though I would just take those with a grain of salt. I think leaning on your property manager is the best practice because they know the areas. They'll let you know if they'll, be comfortable managing this property that we're talking about. Or if it's a sketchy area, then obviously we probably wouldn't purchase it. An agent that you're working with would be helpful too. We have a great agent in St. Louis that I ran this by her as well. They both said that the neighborhood is a C grade neighborhood, which we're comfortable with. That's most of our properties are in C neighborhoods. I think a couple of them are a little bit better than that. We haven't had any issues as far as crime goes. So I would look at those things as well. I think St. Louis as a whole is a good market. It's been good for us so far. I think the other statistics like population growth and job diversification are good as well. So that's a positive. I hope going over this deal was helpful. And don't forget to send me comments or feedback on any thoughts you might have that might help us do better in the future. We'll talk to you soon.